Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Chatham House. Thank you very much for joining us today. It's my great pleasure to welcome you and to members who are joining us through a live web stream as well today to this meeting on Israel in a changing strategic environment with the Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of Israel, Daniel Ayalon. Pleasure to have you here, Minister. I'm delighted you could come and join us on this trip that you have, this visit to London. To say that Israel is in a changing strategic environment is probably a bit of an understatement at the moment, whether we take into account the Arab uprisings that have been taking place, the changes in Syria, and the huge turmoil in that country, US withdrawal from Iraq and the changed context in the Gulf, and obviously the very heightened tensions right now with Iran. We really probably couldn't have a better speaker to be able to discuss these issues with from an Israeli perspective. Mr. Ayalon has had a long and distinguished career in the foreign policy space, having served twice as a deputy foreign advisor to two prime ministers, as the foreign policy advisor to Ariel Sharon. He served in the Israeli embassy in the UN. He has been Israel's ambassador to the United States from 2002 to 2006, although he started his career in the private sector beforehand, and so somebody who can bring, I think, quite a broad sketch and a broad sense of where we stand in this very complex diplomatic and strategic environment today. This meeting, to state the obvious perhaps, is on the record. And we look forward very much to being able to entertain a series of questions after we've heard some opening remarks from the Minister. So, Minister Ayalon, it's a pleasure to have you with us. We look forward to your comments, look forward to conversation. Perhaps come and join your comments with us.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you very much. It's indeed a pleasure to be here at the Chatham House, to be here in London, and I thank you all for coming. Certainly, we are looking at a very, very complex situation today. Let me start maybe with kind of a bird's eye view. If to say that the world is changing is an understatement. I think that for us as leaders or as observers, it is important to characterize the changes in simplistic ways, if it's possible, and then of course to find some ways to address the changes and meet the challenges, and to make sure that whatever happens is for the benefit of mankind and for all of our future. We're talking about a very, very close-knitted world, a global community. And if I have to characterize the changes we have been seeing, I would say for the last 2, maybe 3 decades, is 2 mega trends, if I may. And it may be a little bit simplistic, but I think it's easier for us to understand. And I would say that the first mega trend that I can talk about is of an economic or technological nature, and this is of an integration. It used to be called globalization, but certainly the technological innovation, internet or whatever, makes us all connected, and also it has some adverse maybe effects, especially when it comes to the global financial community. So we know that one bank's, let's say, bad debt may, in one corner of the world can affect all of us. At the same time, of course, the innovation and the technological improvement and advancement also is helping us all. A real globalization and integration. On the other hand, the other mega trend which I see, which is maybe of a political nature, is quite the opposite in direction, which is a disintegration. You may say that it was vividly maybe expressed in the late 80s with the breakup of the Soviet Union to more homogeneous maybe even national groups. We saw the disintegration of Yugoslavia, and maybe what we see today in the Arab world, although it is not identical, but it's quite analogous to what we have been seeing in the communist world, whereby we see a deterioration maybe of the power by strong, some would say dictatorial regimes, and once you have one block kind of falling out of this wall, you see a real tumbling down, which shows you that the forces which have been swept away or have been suppressed by a strong regime maybe are stronger in the long term as they all come out. Nobody can, of course, foresee what the future bodes, certainly not the immediate one for the Middle East, but I would say that the term Arab Spring is a little bit heavily loaded because it evokes a different spring of nation right here in Europe, over the canal in the continent. And we recall that the spring of nations, although the people of Europe, I believe, and the societies in Europe in 1848, just 40, 50 years after the French Revolution, may have been better equipped mentally and society-wise to have these changes. Still, in Europe, it took about 100 years to complete this spring of nations, 2 world wars in between. So we may be very, very cautious of what we wish for or what we term as an Arab Spring. I do not see a spring yet in the Middle East. Quite the contrary. It is no doubt that what we have seen, whether it's in Tunisia or in Egypt or anywhere else, was quite spontaneous and authentic by real people, maybe younger generation, technology savvy, information savvy, that maybe do not want anymore to take any orders from top, explaining to them why they don't have jobs or good education or a good livelihood, let alone dignity, human rights, respect, because of some exogenic threats. Some have used for too many years the Palestinian conflict, but I don't think that these people anymore buy the fact that they do not have jobs because of the Palestinian conflict. Now, the danger I see is that once this first wave of real democratic forces has been kind of exhausted, we see a second wave of more disciplined forces which are well organized and which are very much dedicated to their cause. And these are more radical forces that kind of waited in the wing for the first wave to take down these old regimes, and then they come for front and center to do what they believe in. We have an example, a very bad example, from 1979 in Tehran, if you recall, also spontaneous and quite authentic. People's revolution against a very tyrannic Shah. 4 weeks, a democracy was in place in Tehran with the government of Mr. Bakhtiar at the time. Khomeini came, and the rest is history. And I think the danger that we face today is that Iranian revolution may be replicated all over the Middle East, and none of us, and I'm not just talking about Israel, none of us in the international community can afford another Iran in the Middle East. So this is something which has to be quite understood and emphasized. On the other hand, of course, we have the opportunity. I mean, we were just talking about the downside. The upside, of course, is that if we will see a real democratic forces that in the immediate, interim, and long run take over. And here we have to remember that democracy doesn't start, nor does it end, with an election. Democracy, first and foremost, is a frame of mind. It's a set of value. It's an understanding of the individual and as a society as a whole, what is right and what is wrong, what is decent or what is not. And I think they are universally accepted, what are the norms for a democracy and the values. So this is something which is very, very important to understand. First of all, we need to see a cultural change. Now, this is taking a long time. It could be a generational, it could be even more than a generation, I do not know. But certainly, we have to remember that democracy needs maybe first and foremost institutions, and then rule of law, and then also a strong civil society, let alone all the freedoms, freedom of the press, freedom of religion, protection of minorities. This is also something which is very, very important and maybe has been overlooked somehow, I'd say the danger to minorities throughout the region, whether it's Kurds or whether it's Christians or others. So this is something that we all have to be mindful before we kind of try and help the situation and set some kind of a vision to this region. To sum up, I would say the real opportunity, and including for Israel, is that we will see real democracies which are accountable to the people, because we know in history never a real democracy started a war on other democracies, checks and balances, public opinion, and what have you. So our interest is that this tumult or this development in the Arab world will consummate in, I'm not ashamed to say, European-style democracy. Whether it's achievable and how long it will take, this is, of course, the big question. I believe that the international community as a whole can help somewhat. First of all, help by leading through an example. But, of course, this is not enough. We need to have resources. If we put the finger on what caused the entire architecture in the Middle East to fall, I think it's not coincidental that it started with the one unemployed fruit stand owner in Tunisia. Jobs, the most important thing. If you have seen the UNDP report 2.5 years ago, December of 2009, it was quite, the writing was on the wall. Of course, nobody was looking, including me. But the UNDP report, what was amazing about it, that it was conducted together with Arab experts and Arab intellectuals. And already in 2009, they said that the dysfunctionality in the Arab world as a whole, the problem was, firstly, jobs, that the Arab world collectively needed to create 51 million jobs within the next decade, just to stay where they are, in a level which is much behind the standards internationally. And of course, they talked about the problems are the deficit of democracy and other things. So I think what we can do is basically creating jobs. How do you do it? You need resources, you need investments. I don't have to tell you that we, not in Europe nor in the United States, have now the financial resources to do it. But guess what? The region has more than enough resources. If we talk about the Gulf countries, including Saudi Arabia's, they have mega trillion funds that can be spared for creation of a real industrial base in the countries which are the subject of our discussion. I believe by infrastructure, roads, and housing, this is immediately giving up employment and creating some industrial basis for the continuation. I think this is the way. Of course, we must make sure that these funds are being managed in an appropriate way through accountability and transparency. And I think here, Europe, with its great expertise and experience in managing international institutions, crossing borders, funds, could be very helpful in terms of advice, in terms of any kind of support, so we can give the people of the region, especially the younger generation, hope and vision. Hope is the most important thing. This is our view, and this is Israel's interest. Of course, in the meantime, we must also make sure that negative, radical forces do not just fill the vacuum which has been created so far, and namely, this vacuum is being filled now by radical elements from Iran. Iran should be stopped on two accounts, not only just the nuclear portfolio, but also their very negative political influence, which has been corroborated through deeds, through terrorism. And if we look at the Middle East, any and every flashpoint in the Middle East, you see the fingerprints of Iran, whether it's in Saudi Arabia, whether it's in Bahrain, whether it's in Egypt, whether it's in Lebanon, of course, Hezbollah, whether it's in the Palestinian Authority through Hamas. Today, unfortunately, we have Hamas, which does not necessarily represent Palestinian, but rather Iranian interest. The same goes for Hezbollah. And now I come to, and maybe I will end with that, and of course welcome any of your comments or questions, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. For many years, it has been coined as the main problem of the Middle East. You just solve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, everything will be fine. Well, this has not been the case. We tried to argue for many years, not just now, that this is not the case. If you just look at the facts, historical facts, and you see all the violence inside the countries and also between countries in the Middle East, most of the conflicts had nothing to do with the Palestinian problem. And I can cite just from recent decades, the Iran-Iraq war that claimed more than 1 million lives for 8 years, the invasion of Lebanon by Syria, or the invasion of Kuwait by Iraq. And I can go back to the violence in Algeria or in Yemen, or the Egyptian-Yemen wars in the 60s, had nothing to do with the Palestinian conflict. Every time we tried to claim that, it was deemed as self-serving for us, trying to procrastinate, not trying to really deal with the real issue of the Palestinian problem. Also today, if we look throughout the region, what we've heard is jobs and dignity and respect, nothing about Palestinian issue. If there was anything that was mentioning the Palestinians, it was the exception to the rule, and it was by some agitators who tried to induce this into the conflict. Case in point is the ramage of our embassy in Cairo, which just happened to be about 2 blocks away from the Tahrir Square, and we know of radical Islamists, also Palestinians, who were calling some of the demonstrators in the square to just storm our embassy. Today, in fact, what we see in the streets of Dara or Homs in Damascus, we do not see any burning of Israeli flags, American flags, not even English flags. You see British flags, you see them burning Hezbollah and Iranian flags. So certainly, I think we can say safely, just empirically, and also I think we can prove that the answer to a real hope and vision for the Middle East and beyond does not necessarily go through Jerusalem. Now, this is not to say, and this is maybe my most important point, this is not to say that it is not incumbent upon us to solve the Palestinian problem. I would like to stress here, it is first and foremost an Israeli strategic interest to bring the Palestinian conflict to an end. So we can have the end of claims, the end of conflict, and we can really put together a real cooperation mechanism between us and the Palestinians. This could be possible if we have an approach which is reciprocal. That means concessions do not come only from one side, but also from the other side. When we talk about justice, there is not justice for one side, but to the two sides. The same thing goes for the rights. Historic rights, political rights, and the rights for a future together. So we very much would welcome the continuation of the talks in Amman. I'm very glad to see here the Jordanian ambassador. We have the highest respect for His Majesty, King Abdullah, for the Jordanian people. I think that Jordan is in a way a great example of very responsive leadership, not only towards the people of Jordan, but also taking a leadership role in the region. And we very much welcome the continuation of talks between us and the Palestinians, whether it's in Amman or anywhere else, until we come to a real agreement with the Palestinians. This is our aim. It's not that we are doing a favor to the Palestinians. This is our own interest. And I believe and I hope that we will see also a Palestinian leadership that would depart from a historic approach of all or nothing that they have been taking. And I can use here, since we were in London, the Peel Commission in 1937 that they rejected, and the 1947 partition, and the offers from Prime Ministers Barak in Camp David or Prime Minister Olmert in Annapolis. So to sum it up, I would say that we should address the developments in the Middle East, irrespective of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, as we must, mainly the protagonists, the partners, Israel and the Palestinians, must do everything to solve our own conflict, irrespective of developing around us. Thank you very much.